Good evening, travelers. I am your wonderful host and barkeep for the evening, and tonight we have another tale told within the Mythweaver's Respite. Tonight we have an exciting person by the name of Robert Walker. Now, you have seen him before on the show, but mostly he comes in, talks some crazy psychology stuff, and then vanishes in the blink of an eye. But tonight we've got him for a little while, and one thing I've loved to do over the last couple weeks, well, I would say last couple months at this point, is allow these people to have the opportunity to create a character that maybe they've played before or maybe they haven't, but to bring all of their amazing creativity and adventure into one character. So for tonight's adventure, Robert's going to be bringing a new character to the tavern, and we're going to find out what stories he's going to tell to get things in tavern, because the one thing we all know at the tavern is everything costs a tale. So before we do that, and welcome friends that have joined us this evening, Robert, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I am the host of the Dungeons, Dragons, and Psychology podcast and author of Session Zero, the DMG to writing great campaigns in any system. I am a master's student in industrial organizational psychology, and I've been role-playing for a little over 20 years, various different editions, and really role-playing is kind of not just what I like to do for fun, but it's also what I like to do for my research, and it's really what I hopefully am able to do for, my entire source of income and livelihood one day. I love it that much.
Hey, nothing wrong with that, right, people? However, not only has he done all that stuff, but he was also one of our guests for Plots in Darkenhaven last year. Mm-hmm. He was on our DM's roundtable just a couple weeks ago, and Robert is once again another one of our guests that have come back for a second episode. Now that we've changed over the program and switched things up a little bit, I felt let's bring him back on here and let him tell his own stories. So tonight I'm excited. When he brought Bowen to us for Plots in Darkenhaven, he came with a great backstory, and we were able to weave an amazing tale for it. That tale is being played at Gen Con this year by myself for 2 episodes. So if you're going to Gen Con and you want to see the story that Robert and I and the rest of the Misfits put together with that, come see us there. Of course, before we start, you can always help us out by doing simple things like giving us a like, sharing these with your friends, your family, your players, and if you want to support us a little bit more financially, you can always throw us a subscribe here, or you can gain a little bit more by getting characters that we've created here on the tavern over on our Patreon for $3 a month. Now, this is why everybody comes, and this is what's exciting for me. Robert hasn't been given the full breakdown of how this goes, so we're going to do this kind of on the back end as well. So Robert, what I'm going to ask you to do is I'm going to ask you to find a place in your own world, and I want you to talk about that. I don't want us to talk about anything about your character, but where are we taking this story? Where's the story taking place at?
Let's see. A place I really love being, especially that I find peaceful and makes me feel like a new person every time I go there, is this little mountain lake in central Idaho. It's called Blue Lake, and you have to hike a couple of miles to get in there on a pretty steep trail. But boy, once you get in there, the water is just clear blue. There's a couple of little islands in the middle of the lake, and I've never been there a single time where I had to deal with other people. So it's just a perfect little secluded getaway.
Awesome. So we're going to start in real world, and that's interesting because I don't know what kind of character he's bringing tonight or anything. It could be, and I'm hoping, in all honesty, it's an elephant just because that's the picture. I don't think it's going to be, because most people have not brought that kind of craziness yet, but we're going to find out. Now, the way the story works is that the next time you have a doorway that you're going to open into the tavern. So we're in this secluded area in Illinois. You're there sitting by the lake. You've got a little cabin that you've kind of been going back and forth from for the week as you've been vacationing. Only this time, when you open the door, you don't open up to your own place. Instead, you open up into a very quaint, somewhat quiet, with lights amount of music in the background, these lanterns floating in midair as if hung by nothing, and stone exterior or interior, and a large oak table, oak bar in the back room, and on the front or on the back wall, written in this extremely beautiful, which is calligraphic writing, it says, "The Mythweaver's Respite. Everything costs a tale. Everything is bought by a story." So as you walk through the threshold, you step in. How do you feel? Or how does your character feel, rather?
He feels surprised by seeing this interesting display before him, expecting just to walk into his little cabin and see his normal dining table with a few things he had gathered throughout the day spread upon it, but instead he is greeted with this warm environment and comforting, relaxing place that feels comfortable, but also takes him with a little bit of awe and shock.
You hear it come from the back room. Hold on, hold a second. I'll be there. Just 1 second. And as you start to walk in, kind of bustling through these 2 swaying double doors, is this over-the-top, absolutely enlarged version of a dwarf and man. He is wearing what looks like brown overalls at this point. And he always has his trusty towel that's flipped over his shoulder, and he combs his long beard down. He says, "Welcome to Mythweaver's Respite. It seems to me that you have a tale to tell. Take a seat, have a drink. Let's find out why you're here."
So the character sits down. He also is a dwarven man, long red hair, long red beard, very intricately braided and well kept. He's wearing fine clothing. He looks as though he takes very good care of his appearance. And so he hops up onto the stool and sits across from the tavern keeper. "All right, you want a tale. I suppose I could do that. I'm really a bit confused about how I got here. Could you enlighten me as to where I am?"
Well, you, my friend, my famous friend, are part of a amazing group of stories in a place called the Mythweaver's Respite, a tavern that only shows itself after a tale is needed to be told.
I suppose the tale I would have to tell is the one about why I ended up all on my own out in the wilderness, away from my clan, away from my friends. Well, you see, I'm a bard by trade. Except, apparently, everyone thinks I do it wrong. I don't think I do it wrong. I inspire people. That's what I do. That's the job of a bard. But apparently, being told what they could do better isn't everyone's favorite way to be inspired. Might have gotten me in a little bit of hot water, I suppose. Lost a few friends along the way. But really, they do better when I tell them what to do. I suppose I'm at a loss as to why they told me I was just a negative Nelly or something like that and sent me on my way. So now I've been just sort of looking after myself. Bit alone. I'd like to find some new friends. Maybe that's why I'm here. What do you think? Are there friends to be found?
Well, there's not many people here, and not many people stay. But maybe we can talk a bit and figure out a little bit more about yourself and give you a little guidance on this from an old dwarf who's seen a thing or two and heard more than most.
Well, I suppose it all started when I decided to join a few of my clansmen and go out after a dragon. I agreed to go along on this epic quest because I want to tell stories about it in the future. All bards have to have great stories, and, well, frankly, I'm not very good at mining, I'm not very good at gem cutting or forging, but I do love stories, and I wanted to get some of my own. So, me and 3 others, we descended deep into the underbelly of the mountain where we would find the Shadow Dragon. And along the way, we encountered many different challenges. And every time we had one, I'd do what bards do. I inspired my friends. They might swing and a miss, and, well, I'd just tell them that they weren't very good at what they were doing.
That's not really much of an inspiration.
But, when you're told you're doing something wrong, you feel better. You want to be better. I just figured if they knew all the little things they did wrong, they'd get better along the way. But they just seem to get irritated with me every time. I mean...
Have you ever tried... And I apologize for interrupting you, but have you ever tried, maybe when they did something good, tell them they did something good?
Well, frankly, when they're doing things good, they don't really need my inspiration. They only need it when they're mucking up and failing all over the place. That's why I tell them, maybe swing a little closer to his body, or, you're making an awful lot of noise trying to sneak around like that. Why don't you try keeping it down? And of course, it worked. They were inspired, but they kept saying I was still bothering them.
Seems like you might need a little inspiration yourself.
Yeah, that's what they said too.
Normally, when you hear it from multiple people, you have to kind of look at yourself and wonder if you're the common denominator.
So you're saying I'm going about this whole bard thing all wrong then?
How about I pour you a drink and we figure this out?
Aye. A drink I could not say no to.
Flips around, pulls out what seems to be a small keg, places it up on the table, pours 2 full things of ale. Now, when I say a keg, the keg's only about this big. Should only hold about 2 cups. But he seems to pour 2 full steins out of this keg and then quickly slips it and swings it underneath the oak table again, or the oak bar. Now, I'm going to drop out of accident for a moment, and we're going to break into this character a little bit. So give us a little bit of a description of who we're looking at here.
So Geo is a dwarven bard who basically tries to do his inspiration through negging, negative reinforcement, and always telling the party what they're doing wrong rather than inspiring them to be better than they are, assuming that the things that make people better is having their mistakes pointed out so that they can correct them. So he's a bit of a... Yes, he's very introspective and maybe a little bit socially awkward when it comes to bards, but he does all the apparent right things. He dresses right. He looks charismatic. He seems to be what you would expect to see in a bard. It's just when he opens his mouth, instead of songs and stories and inspiring tales and performances, you get a list of things that you should be doing better or are doing wrong.
So what does Geo look like? I know you told me he has long red hair, long red beard. It's nicely kept. What are some other features that we're seeing on Geo that maybe bring out his uniqueness?
He's fairly fair-skinned, hasn't spent a lot of time on the surface, so he's a little bit paler than some dwarves that get out and about. But he does have a lot of interesting freckles under his eyes, and to look at him, he's very, very clean. He obviously cares an awful lot about being presentable and having a very clean appearance. So he's obviously a little bit self-deluded. He's more interested in himself than he really is in others, and That's, I think, why he chooses to point out the negatives in others, and he only, of course, sees the positives in himself. You would probably find him in near noble's attire, but something that has a little bit of a bardic flair to it.
Right. It's got some, some frills, some whatever the type of material that'd be around, but it would be at a higher class level. It wouldn't be. You might not be rocking the full on noble's attire, but it's going to have some flair to it on top of it. Okay.
Right. And he's not going to be carrying around any instruments like you might think of a bard as doing. The things he carries around are going to be more pens and papers, things that he can document his travels and his stories, and provide a written account for his comrades of the things that he noticed that they might need to work on as well.
Yeah, so interesting character, and be definitely interested to see the character played out. Now, as the barkeep and you are talking, one thing that's catching him off guard is the fact that the presentation is very well done. But how's the demeanor of him? Are we holding a very strong demeanor? Are we more more cautious, nervous?
He has an air of confidence.
Okay.
That he sort of believes he's always right. So he doesn't really seem cautious. He seems more egotistic. He seems a little more arrogant in nature. Okay. He doesn't do it maliciously, because he does seem to be, as he speaks, there's these moments where it's obvious that he does care about other people and about their success and about having friends and being part of a group, but he just doesn't seem to understand the parts of himself that make that difficult.
Right. Okay. Cool. So as he gives you the drink, he sits down, kind of places his arms on the bar again, and he goes, "So, it seems to me that you're looking for a new party, a new group of friends or a new group of companions. My question is you've said you're looking for stories, but you want to make your own. What is the purpose of you making your own stories instead of telling others?"
Well, everyone wants to be the hero in their own story, and frankly, when I join up with friends and we go on these encounters, adventures, things like that, I really, they're really there to help me out, of course. I look at me, my friend. I'm obviously the face of the story, right? Not these rugged vagabonds that I run around with. I need muscle, I need magic, I need things of that nature, but really the hero's always the one with the bright smile, the one that all the ladies fawn over,
I've been that vagabond many a time. And for many,
well, of course. Sorry?
For many, I remember those days when the person with the smile, the person that got the words. I can also remember the days when I pulled him out of the muck. And one day, maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but you're going to need those people. Because if you can't swing a sword and you can't throw a spell, you're not killing a dragon. And you're not telling the story of killing the dragon.
Well, of course, as I write this story, I'm not going to exclude my friends' contributions. I mean, I made a clear point of pointing out what they needed to do for us to defeat the dragon, and but I see what you're saying.
Thinking maybe maybe just once, when you're in these complex situations, you think about those people next to you and you actually, work with them.
I work with them. So you're saying let them fail?
I'm saying if they fail, help them succeed. But also when they succeed, inspire them to continue to succeed.
All right. So I could say something like, all right, you weren't very stealthy, but you still managed to pull it off. That's great work.
We're getting better.
Okay.
Maybe not exactly, but we're getting there. Tell me another time when maybe what you told somebody didn't really work out too well for you. And maybe we can fix some of these questions that you might have why you're losing so many friends.
Well, I suppose there was right before I finally left the clan. There was my lovely lady, and of course, it is the dream of every dwarf to have a good family and raise the wee little dwarflings. And well, I might have maybe told her that before our betrothal, she might need to work on making sure that we both looked stellar in front of everyone. And it earned me a swift slap across the face. And I think that might have been the wrong thing to say to a lady. Perhaps.
You might be learning. Maybe a little. Couple more slaps and you might figure it out.
Aye, that one still stings.
I will say, though, for somebody that says that they want to adventure and tell their own tales, but yet you want a family and you want to grow old within the clan, do you think you could have both?
Well, got to have at least one great adventure, and then after that, settle down.
Or not come home.
Or not come home. As it seems like I'm doing, not because we failed, but because everyone there was a bit upset with me.
That's not a good reason not to go home. But either way, it seems to me that your perspective is what's getting you in a lot of trouble. And hopefully, listening to another dwarf and from another time in a new place will give you a little bit of a different look at things.
Hi. So you're saying, if I'm understanding you correct, it's very likely I'm the problem?
I'm saying, and I'm saying this in a very nice way, get your head out of your ass.
All right. Yeah. It's tough love, I suppose.
Go home, find your girl, give her a big old hug, tell her you love her, stay in, write the stories of everything you've heard. People don't get to get all those stories. They're not all written down. It's not worth it for somebody like myself who's been through many adventure. It's pretty lonely when you've lost most of your friends.
Aye, there's not a great feeling. Not something I want to live with anymore. I miss home. I miss her. But I'm afraid I'll say the wrong thing again. Seems like all I do.
Best you can do is try again. Maybe this time when you think, maybe I should tell her what she's doing wrong. And hopefully you're going to feel that slap on your face from the last time you did that. You're going to go, maybe I shouldn't say a word.
I like that. Just silence my own voice.
Maybe every once in a while.
You speak some good wisdom there, friend. Thanks for the drink.
Thanks for the tales. It's paid more in tale than you know. And hopefully, the next person that walks through that door, I'll use this story to help another.
Use stories to help another. Maybe instead of telling everyone what I think they're doing wrong, I could tell them tales about others who've been successful and inspire them with history.
Now, that might be a tale worth telling.
Aye.
And if you need any more inspiration, just look at the walls. So, as you look, you didn't notice this going in. Every single rock, every single crevice has almost like been imprinted stories from other travelers that have come through here. And he points over to the side of the room next to one of the columns. He goes, in there, right there, same story you told me will rest for eternity.
That's some masterful magic. A tavern of tales. All right. Do you mind if I write a few down?
Go ahead. Just give the people their credit.
Aye. That I'll do. That I will do.
And he starts to, as you write down some tales, the door cleans up, cleans the 2 glasses, places them underneath the bar, allows you to take a moment, take a deep breath. And as we close down, the dwarf asks you kindly, go home. Your life isn't worth it to risk for just a tale. That's the only reason you're out here fighting. It's not worth it. Too many people are lost.
Hey, I think you're right. Like I said, I miss it. I miss my home.
And if you want to tell a tale of a dragon, and he points over a right shoulder, and you don't notice this until he points, but there's literally the trophy of a red dragon head sitting on it above his right shoulder on the wall. And then a masterful great axe on the left shoulder, above the left shoulder.
That looks like a tale to tell.
It's a tale for another day, at another time, with a lot more alcohol.
Always game for that.
I'll get out of here. Find your love.
Thank you, sir. And he'll hop off the bench and head out the door.
All right. So as he hops off the door, he walks out. He stares off towards the lake, and you hear the door shut behind you as you close it. And as you do, you think back for a moment. Turn around. You open the door. You open it back into your cabbage, or into your cottage. Your small, quaint dining room. And inside there, you notice things that you've placed on there, reminders of home. And it allows you to kind of reminisce. You take these 2 things and you head home. And as you walk down the road heading back towards your clan, hopefully to resolve the issues that you've created for yourself. the screen will go black, and our tale will be over for the evening. Thank you, Robert, for bringing Geo to the tavern.
Thank you. That was fun.
All right. So, we brought a character to life. We've had fun. We've brought some story to it. Some stories are told by the players. Some stories are told by the keeper. Either way, the stories are always told here. Now, the fun part. Now we get to dive behind the scenes to the person who created Geo. So, Robert is a psychology major, and he gets to be on my show. So happy. But actually, no, it's really exciting to dive into this type of theology and just thought process. When you were creating your character for tonight, and I know we didn't have a ton of time because this was kind of a rushed session due to we had our last guest get very ill, and he's recovering tonight, but he said he has no voice. I didn't want to try to push him through this. What were some things you thought about when creating a character? Or what are some things you do think about when creating characters?
Well, a lot of the things I pull from real life, either people I know, situations I've been involved in, or other media that I've consumed and really captured my attention. So this character kind of was a conglomeration of a couple of different things. One of them being a situation that's been happening in our life, which it's one of those things that just kind of lays heavily on, and it's good to draw upon. And I think for me, that's one of the things I love about role playing is it gives you that opportunity to sort of safely in a controlled and safe environment have the opportunity to experiment with things that you're dealing with in your real life and sort of workshop those things. Right. And characters are a great way to do that. I have some episodes on my show that talk about why you should play characters that don't represent you, because it gives you an opportunity to sort of investigate the life of another person. And as I'm thinking of characters and how they interact in the world, there's three things that really play into, for me, what is a memorable character, and that would be what moral flexibility they have, whether they're stern and rigid, or they can easily adapt to a situation and be sort of more empathic towards other characters and those around them. What type of personal agency do they have, and does the player have? Like, do you have the freedom to make choices about their background, about their species, about everything that they've done in their life, or are you kind of boxed into a story that you have to fit in? And that agency lends a lot to the type of story that you're going to play, I think, and the type of character that you should bring into a story. And then, of course, the last thing is narrative immersion. Like, I want a character that is going to have their own story that's also really important, but also that story plays into the bigger story that is being told by the DM. So being immersed in the narrative, I think, means being immersed in the narrative of your character. So if you can get really invested in all of that, it's going to make the entire story better for everyone. And I think that a group of people that are all immersed in the narrative of their stories are going to be very immersed in the narrative of the greater story.
No, I agree. And it's interesting that you brought specific things that you said you're dealing with right now in real life to the tavern. One thing I've really enjoyed about this takes everything else out of the picture. There's no stats. There's no dice rolls. It's strictly two people playing characters the way the character would be played. So you can test out a lot of strange scenarios and interactions with people without having to really worry about, are the dice going to change it? Is the narrative going to change? This is only two characters in a very, very tight-knit community or situation where that doesn't change. So your constant is consistent. And it really, I think after a few more episodes, and I think I'm going to do this sooner or later, and this is probably going to be what I'm going to talk to you about, is I would love to hit the other side of things. So you created Session Zero, and I read that book from start to finish as soon as I got it. Thankfully, Robert was awesome to send me a copy. We did a review. I need to do another review and actually put it up. But that was before I got somewhat skilled with a video camera, and I'm still not great. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. I'm not great at it, but I'm learning. And it'd be interesting to do the other side. So Session Zero is all about building the game. You know, it's building that first episode. You know, it's getting the game ready to go. We need something for characters, though. I think it's not there yet, and I don't know anywhere else. And if people know where this could be at, building a character being a good, strong character takes so much more than stats, in my opinion. And I'd love to have a resource that I could give players, especially new players who are like, I have no idea what to do with this character.
Yeah.
Now there is the DMG, you know, and there's the player's handbook and things like that. They go over some basics, you know, what's your background, what's some flaws, what's your allies, your foes, those types of things. But I think that can be broken down deeper. And I know there is something called the hero's story, and it's kind of like the projection there. And I think it'd be something I'd love to go to as part of like almost like a skeleton to a larger project that would actually create it. It takes investment from the DM to also understand it and keep digging. You're right, it does. Sometimes though, you get unexperienced DMs. You get underdeveloped characters who they need that extra push. Now, when you're in those situations, what do you do?
Well, you know, like I think the comment that you just got is very right. Like a skilled dungeon master can encourage players to think very deeply about their characters, what their character believes, their motivations. You know, what circumstances will they have character growth? All these sort of things. You know, how do they act in morally ambiguous dilemmas? You know, all important things to consider for a character. But if, you know, you're just, you know, kind of like me today was just told like, okay, just bring a character, show up at the tavern and be ready to tell a tale and talk about it. You have to be able to draw on something. You need a starting point and a way to develop something into a tangible, believable experience for a character. And I've seen that happen a lot with especially new players that aren't ready to engage in any kind of role playing because they're not comfortable being that character. They're more comfortable just rolling the dice and letting the rules take place. Right. But this sort of role play where there's no character sheet, there's no rules expectations, where it's literally just embodying a persona and bringing that persona to life, that's a whole different skill set. I mean, you're very right. It is a whole different skill set, and
it's a whole different skill set. I
love your idea of having something to guide people who may not know where to start with that, and find that path so that they can get there, whether or not their DM may be supportive, or maybe they're in an entirely new group of all new players and none of them know where to start. And I think that could be a challenging thing, but yeah, let's find that resource, because that's a great freaking idea.
Let's find it, let's create it, let's do something,
right?
No, I agree. And you know, after doing this so many times so far and having characters being brought here, and some characters, they're bringing characters that they've played for years and they have this huge backstory on, and others like yourself, you're like, I was told this 20 minutes ago, I got to come up with a character, what do I do? I think it would be really cool to have either a blueprint, an outline, something that would give you as a player being like, okay, this is the box I start in, you know, this is where we're starting, but what are some ideas of how to think outside of it? Maybe for specifically those people you just talked about, the ones who aren't ready to role play, the ones who aren't ready to, they want to kind of let the dice do their job, they want to just kind of sit in the background a little bit more on the social aspect of it, still giving them a device or a tool that would allow them to create a character that's deeper developed, that they can still play with in a more developed or a more rounded out character.
Yeah. So I
would
think
still be useful.
One piece of advice that I've given in the past, I'm a meticulous note taker when it comes to enjoying other forms of media. I have like a note for all the things I want to remember as a dungeon master and all the things I want to remember as a player. And when it comes to a player, if I'm watching a TV show or a movie and there's a really interesting character, I'll just make a note of what TV show and what that character is and what I liked about it. And then later on, when I'm developing a character or trying to come up with an idea, that's a really great starting point. And one thing that I continue to say is that really bad character impersonations make really great characters for D&D. So I give the example of maybe you do a really terrible Rocky Balboa impersonation, but if you can think of Rocky Balboa and the way he acts in certain circumstances and the way he interacts with people, and even if you do like a really bad impersonation of him, that's still a really fun character. Like he cares a lot about the people who are important to him. He's willing to fight for what he believes in. He may not have the highest intelligence, but he definitely has the street smarts. And so you can develop an entire persona just based on this character and then evolve it into a fantasy setting. Like that would be a really great barbarian or a really great fighter. And you just kind of use those personality quirks. You can feel more comfortable because you didn't have to think of all these things off the top of your head. You already have an idea, a framework inside your mind of what that character is going to look like and how they're going to behave. And so once you have those things, I think it's much easier to feel confident in role playing is when you have a framework.
That's true. And I'd be interested to see, like, when you're watching media, and this might help somebody down the road, what are some things that really catch your eye that you're like, this would be fun to play as a character, or this would be a cool NPC? Like, what are some of those triggers that you catch on yourself consistently where you're like, okay, I'm going to write this down?
It's so for the most part, I'll just pull up my note tab really quick and I can give you an example. For the most part, what I really key onto is quotes. If I hear somebody say something, it will usually inspire me for an entire campaign idea, or if it's just a character who says something really unique, then I can grab onto that and say, okay, that would be a really cool perspective for an entire character to have just based on that one little quote. And so there's this, like, for example, I've got a quote on here from Yellowstone that the main character says in that. He says, "You know what's wrong with you? You justify your every bad action before you commit it." And so I think of that and like, okay, so a character who justifies every bad action before they commit it. You could have a rogue who's just always like, oh yeah, well we're just gonna sneak in there, we're gonna steal this thing, and it's gonna be great. And honestly, guys, don't worry about it. They're super rich. They're not gonna miss it at all.
They're not gonna miss it anyways.
Yeah, and we're gonna do good things with all this money, you know. So like, you just build a character off that simple quote idea. Simple quote. And that's what grabs me. So if I hear a quote that's like, wow, that's a great quote, I'll immediately pause it, write the quote down, and then throw it into, is that a DM idea or is that a player idea?
It's interesting too. I'm wondering how your significant other deals with that too. Can you pause movies all the time?
I really do. And a lot of times she's gotten to the point, like, maybe it used to bother her, but she's gotten so cued in to me doing that if I don't catch a quote, she'll hey, that was a great quote. Like, you should use that for a character. You should use that in the story you're running right now. And I'll be like, you know what? You're right, babe. Pause the show. I'm going to write that down. So she's kind of, she enables me now.
Yeah, no, you're right. If the character's motive, question motive, if it's a character development, then we move with that from then on. I believe you're correct, and I very seldomly use alignment anymore.
Yeah.
Alignment's kind of been tossed out the window since, I don't play the whole, if you're evil, you can only hold these items. If you're the good and evil thing, I'll play with. The whole chaotic lawful thing, in my opinion, it's very hard to have a player hold that for an entire, unless they're very developed characters that are ready to play that way. Because I would hate to have a player who's like, I'm a lawful good person, and then break a law and be like, it is what it is. Like,
yeah. Yeah,
but
I agree with that.
To play those.
And personally, for myself, one of most interesting stories are those where there's a level of moral ambiguity and grayness. There's not a clear line between what is good and what is evil, and those things that are heinously evil are always going to be heinously evil. I mean, so that's something that you can sort of stand by, like slavery and torture and things like that are always going to have that level of heinousness that are going to be evil, just like generosity and love and compassion are always going to be good. But most of us live somewhere in the middle most of the time. And I think it's important to understand that characters are like that too. People make mistakes, and those mistakes could be considered evil, but realistically they're just human, right? Or they're just dwarven or whatever your species might be. So I think that you're right. The alignment system, which I used to I used to tout and I used to be all for, as I've evaluated it more over the years, I've strayed away from that much more.
And I know there are a lot of people out there who have developed their own types of alignment and their own moral code on things like this. Personally, I liked, if I'm going to use alignment, what I'm asking the player to do when I ask for their alignment is, up until the beginning of the adventure, this is how I do it. And you don't have to do it this way. This is just a thing to add to your toolbox. Up until the beginning of the adventure, what is the alignment of your character? What is the development of your character up to this point? Because I believe once you start entering these unknowns into the character can very quickly develop something new. Yeah. But I like to at least give them that click in the back of their head. It's like, oh no, I was, when we started the game, this. Mm-hmm. This is how I perceive the character. This is where the character, and a lot of times people use, I'm going to use the very simple analogy of the lawful good paladin, right? Yep. But day one, he's got to decide, does he remove the clerical leader, or does he allow the clerical leader to sacrifice the child? Right. That's hard to tell, because you're lawful, so you're following the rules of the law, but you're good, so you're kind of weaving those puzzles. Now, I don't think I would throw that at a level 1 character in the first place, because I just think that'd be cruel and unusual punishment for people, unless that's what you're building your entire campaign launch on, mm-hmm. Which is a completely different story, and you need to talk to your players about stuff like that.
You have to
do so, please.
Well, along the lines of that very example that you're talking about, it was really well illustrated in a 3.5 book called The Book of Exalted Deeds, and there's this image in there that always stands out in my mind when talking about alignment, and it's a paladin with his sword pointing down at 2 female succubus lovers who are basically, shying away from his sword while still holding on to each other. And the caption underneath it is, a paladin must choose between destroying evil and honoring love. And I think that's a perfect example, because even that lawful good character has to understand that love and compassion can still exist within creatures who are darker and possibly even irredeemable, but still love is a virtue. So it is definitely a catch-22.
That's a brutal catch-22. It really to the feels.
It is, yeah. And I always think of it, because every time I see that image, I'm like, man, that's a really tough moral dilemma. Because what would I do if I was that paladin? I have no idea.
I have no idea. Would I be able to, this is telling me I need to strike these things down. That is telling me, is it right for me to strike it down?
Right.
So it's like,
and maybe they're not as evil as
right.
I'm
The other
supposed to
ones.
believe that they are, right?
Right.
They obviously feel love, they feel connection, they feel
Right.
the same feelings of goodness that I espouse and that I find virtuous and that I'm trying to fight for in the first place.
Mm-hmm. No, you have to figure out how they're feeding and things like that, but that's a different
Sure.
story completely. You know, we're only diving into the very small snippet of what's going on in the puzzle.
Right.
But no, you're right. And this was kind of the excitement, because this is why I named it, you know, Psychology of a Character, because that was what I wanted to dive into, is these puzzle pieces of how to create a really good character and how to make it feel like it's a living, breathing character and not just a piece of paper, right? And those moral dilemmas and those confrontations are kind of what brings that out to the forefront. You know, it's one thing to strike a demon down or kill a group of orcs or, you know, save a city. It's another thing to try to figure out why you're doing things like this and the reasoning behind it and the people that are connected to it, and things like that, where you start to see the unraveling of the puzzle pieces. And that's where the interest of the character starts to develop very quickly in development. Even orcs have babies. You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
The first time I sent a group of people because the town didn't like the orcs outside their town, and they went in, and I was like, well, you ran into the guards, and now you ran into the kid that runs across from tent to tent with a ball because he kicked the ball outside the tent real fast. And about the time I said that, I had 3 out of the 4 characters go,
yeah.
What? I'm like, orcs don't just come up 6.5 feet tall, mean and grumpy. Doesn't work like that.
Right.
Unless you're in the world of Tolkien.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, they're just kind of born out of the ground. Yeah,
they're born out of the ground at 6.5 feet tall and angry and ugly. You know, it depends on how you play your orcs. So, but yeah, it's an interesting concept. Thanks, audience, for participating tonight. A lot of these are good questions and things to talk about. So, one thing that always puzzles me is when you start a campaign and you give your players your basis of your campaign. What are some things that you like to provide or like to have ready for your players so that they are not, in the dark when creating characters?
Yeah. So one thing that I've done, and I started doing it really just in the last few years, but I found it to be really helpful for my own narrative, but also for the characters to create, is creating a campaign one sheet that everyone can look at before character creation. Something that's going to give them a basic idea of the area that they're going to be starting the campaign, a few things that pretty much any character who lived in that area is going to know, or anyone around the world is going to know about the world and about the setting. That way, and probably a few NPCs as well, but just simple, a couple paragraphs on a single page, maybe a couple of images, something that they can build a backstory around. Because if they're building in a void, it's much like if you were trying to write a campaign in a void without the characters, right? There's just not a lot to be done. Sorry, excuse me.
You're good.
But if they have an idea of a foundation upon which they can start building their character, it's going to give them ideas of NPCs that they can tie their character to, so that you're going to have plot points to start with. It's going to give them ideas about what a character living in that world would do on a day-to-day basis, so that they know what their background is going to look like.
Right.
And I always say on my show, I said it in my book, that low-level characters and first-level characters are quite literally characters who lack experience. So I like humble beginning stories where the characters have just a very limited amount of background experience, but what they really have is relationships.
Right.
Relationships with each other or relationships with the world around them. They don't have experience of going out into the world and taking out orc camps or bringing down dragons. When people bring those kind of stories to me at level 1, I'm kind of like, well, then why are you level 1? You know, like that's
right. Yeah, no,
that's
100%.
the tale of a level 10 character. So
yeah, humble beginnings is one thing that I still, after reading your book, it kind of very, very instantly resonated with me, because you're right. You know, people bring you, and I always use this analogy, people bring you Batman, and you're like, no. Batman's the level 20 guy. You got to go, or the level 10 guy, like you said. You know, we need to bring you down to Bruce Wayne right after dad, you know, right after the parents were killed.
Yeah.
And Alfred's starting to kind of warm you up to what life is going to be like now. And I'm not.
And that's a perfect example, right? Because when that character was first created, the tragedy that guided him into becoming Batman and the mentorship that he had, the interaction with the NPC, those are the same kind of things you want to look for when building your own NPCs or building your own PCs. You don't need to have a tragedy like that, but you want to have a relationship with one or two people in the world that are important to you, that have shaped the character that you're playing, so that you have motivations to, you know, go on adventures, step outside of your comfort zone. It's really hard to do that when you don't have some sort of tie to the world or tie to people in the world. If you're just an island unto itself, then nothing really matters to you from the story.
No, completely. The other thing that always throws me, and this is not being rude to anybody, but if I'm a farmer and I'm content with farming, because I've gotten these stories every once in a while, like, you know, I'm a farmer in a local area, you know, I have a lovely wife and kids. Why the hell are you going adventuring then? Like, you have to give me something. And it's always what I ask people. For anybody who's creating new characters, the first thing I ask somebody is, what is making you step out that doorstep?
Right.
Is it revenge? Is it glory? Is it greed? Is it what is it? Because if you're content in your bubble of the world and your foundation of how your character's created, unless you're going to let me as the dungeon master create that chaos, which then prepare for hell, then I personally would say you need to think a little bit deeper into that, because a good example is I'm about to start a campaign with my two boys, and I've never done a two-person campaign before, but we were trying to figure this all out. And my one son has never played. My other's been playing with me for years, and he was like, I don't really know what I want to do. And my other boy was like, let's be pirates. And I was like, excellent. He goes, well, figure out what I need to do there, Dad. I said, okay. You're the brute, because you want to play a barbarian. You're the brute that's been picked up by the pirates and is kept in a cage until they get to the place that they need to go. And I said, we'll figure out where you came from after that, because that's not part of the story of where you need to be right now. But I put him in those tragic that situation so that there's a reason why he's adventuring. It's not his own choice. But it gives him a reason to adventure and to start the story. But sometimes it's nice to keep the backstory humble, even at high levels, because not all characters tell all their tales all at once. Or sometimes it's nice to collaborate on what tales might exist in their past. The Secret of Chalice, I completely agree. I think most characters should play a more humble, created character before a story is told. And the reason I say that is because normally you don't start out before level 5. And what I consider that is tier 1. Tier 1 to me is considered local heroes. So if nothing else, even if you're starting at level 5, which means you're just about to step out of the world of being your local hero, you can still tell small tales. You know, I saved a kid from a burning building. I rescued a merchant from a band of orcs. Those are still considered small tales, but you're not going to be the same person that's going to be telling the tale of, I slayed the red dragon. Those are much larger concerns in the world and have a lot more impact in the world.
Yeah.
So that's where I kind of tell people, that's kind of how I break my games down. I said, okay, from level 1 to 5, you're a local hero. So that means people in the area might have heard of you. People outside of the area probably have no idea who you are, unless you have created that type of a story where you've now made more production or more influence. From 5 to 10, you're a regional hero. So that's maybe the continent that you're on. Maybe it's the kingdom you work in. And then 10 to 15, you've kind of become a world hero. And my opinion of 15 to 20 is you are known throughout whatever realms that you're in, and you're probably being looked at by creatures and entities outside of the material realm.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I've always broken it down, is every 5 levels you kind of getting your reputation. But I don't know if, like I said, I still think humble is definitely a good option and a good person.
I definitely agree, because I think a big part of most good stories is that there's a catalyst. There's some reason for change and reason for stepping outside of what makes a character comfortable. And without that opportunity, you really don't have the opportunity for character growth, which really is part of the hero's journey. Is if a hero is already this epic badass thing and not afraid of the world and not afraid of leaving the life that they have and don't really have any cares, there's not a lot of opportunity for character growth. So even if you start humble and you start expect some sort of a catalyst to sort of push you out the door. It's the threat to the Shire. What was the other one that I was just thinking of? Star Wars. It's the wrong droid falling into his lap and having to leave the hydro farm, when his aunt and uncle are killed. And there's just things like that humble life where it seems very boring and mundane. Something is going to be a spark that ignites the adventure, and I think just be ready for that. And if you're going to not give your DM a lot of ideas to go on of what it might be, then be ready for that spark to be.
Preparing for the spark.
Yep, get ready for a big fire.
Yeah, and I do tell people, and I think that's one thing that as a game master, and this is what I'm going to lead the evening off with. As a game master, if you don't give them a spark, be open to be provided a spark. Don't think that it's going to, because most of the time, I will say, I can't say all the time because I don't know all the game masters out there. In most cases, they're building a spark that's not only going to set you on a journey, but it's going to wrap around the world that they're creating, which then helps the entirety of the process to continue. And with that, and with some of these amazing tips, and I hope people have been taking notes, because I am going to be re-listening to this one specifically for a lot of notes. Thank you, Robert, for coming to the Tavern tonight.
Always a pleasure. Love being here.
And hopefully the Tavern will be opening for more than just tales in the future, but real life has to clean itself up a little bit first. Once again, Robert, how can they find you?
Pretty easy to find the show. You can find it on any podcast platform. It's the Dungeons, Dragons, and Psychology podcast. On Instagram, I'm at Dungeons, Dragons, Psychology. And from there, you can find a Linktree link to all of my socials and pretty much everywhere you can get a hold of me. You can also find my book on Amazon. That's Session Zero, the DMG to Writing Great Campaigns in Any System. Check it out. You can do it through Kindle, or you can order a paperback copy. On my Patreon right now, though, if you join that, if you like the show and you join it, I am doing a thing where the highest tier gets a autographed copy of the book mailed to them. So that's kind of a cool thing for anyone who's interested.
Awesome. All right. And of course, I am the barkeep, but I'm also the game master here at Tabletop Misfits, and the face of Wednesday nights. And you can find us always here on Twitch at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on both Wednesdays and Sundays. You can also find us on all the social medias at Tabletop Misfits. And of course, you find this show on Friday morning. This show will go live on YouTube. So if you would please do us a big favor, and we'd appreciate it a lot, give a like, give it a subscribe and over there on YouTube, and share it to your friends. We'd appreciate so much the help, and we can't thank you people, thank the community enough for just being amazing and helping us grow. We hope you're enjoying this, and of course, we'll see you guys hopefully on Sunday as we continue our secondary improv show right now while we're getting ready for our new project coming up here in the next month or so, for another game of kick ass and chew bubblegum, where there's only 2 rules: you either kick ass or you chew bubblegum. Until then, we'll see you. Have a wonderful evening. Good night.